Welcome. I'm Dreamy.
I am Foxy.
So let's get started and see where we're going to take you today. On today's episode, we're going to look at our flight from Sydney in Australia to Newcastle in the UK. Then we'll cover the drive up the east coast, stopping at Berwick-Upon-Tweed for lunch, before making our way up into Scotland, where we'll have our first day of the holiday at the beautiful Glengarry Castle Hotel in Invergarry. But first things first, just a reminder that this video is purely for entertainment purposes. Prices were correct as of June and July 2022, and most importantly, if there are any errors, it will always be Foxy's fault. Back in 2019, when we first arranged this holiday, we had deviated from our normal carrier of Qantas and went instead with Cathay Pacific, flying from Sydney to Manchester via Hong Kong and flying back from Paris, which was to be our original departure point. I know we were concerned about the riots in Hong Kong affecting our journey. Oh, how we laughed about that later. I can't remember why, but when COVID interrupted those plans, we reverted back to type for this holiday. This time we were flying into Newcastle, which Qantas doesn't do, which, thinking about it actually, is probably why we weren't going with them in the beginning. So the flight was from Sydney on the Airbus A380, refuel in Singapore, continue to Heathrow and then change to a domestic British Airways flight up to Newcastle. Coming back would be much more straightforward with Qantas code sharing with Emirates, so we could fly directly from Newcastle to Dubai and then from Dubai to Sydney. I don't know about other airlines, but Qantas send absolutely loads of flight change emails, all minor things such as 5 to 10 minute changes in takeoff times, landing times, that sort of thing. So by the end of it, I was only glancing at them before filing them away for nearer the time. This may have been a tactical error. When I was sorting out all the pre-holiday paperwork just before we left, I did my last double check of flight times, only to notice that at some point in the previous 8 months, Qantas had changed the actual plane from the A380 to their new Dreamliner service. This meant that instead of stopping at Singapore, it would have a refuelling stop in Darwin and then travel all the way through to Heathrow, an uninterrupted flight of about 17 hours, instead of the Singapore Heathrow travel time of around 14 hours. Now that extra 3 hours doesn't sound so bad, but oh my goodness, it really was. We can't give too much of a review of Darwin Airport. It was the middle of the night when we arrived. The only people in the place seemed to be those from our flight and those new travellers about to embark on our plane. However, there was a coffee shop and a duty-free shop open, but I think that was about it. Probably what made our onward flight worse was that the Dreamliner felt a lot more, I guess snug is the word Qantas would prefer me to use, rather than cramped, which is how it felt. Foxy, at 6'3", always claims the window seat, so I then have to make do with the middle seat. I also can't really sleep on aeroplanes. Fitful dozing is the best I can manage. Also, as the flight was still operating on extensive safety protocols due to COVID, we had to wear masks at all times, unless eating and drinking. We also couldn't walk up and down the aisles to stretch our legs. We couldn't even have more than one person in the queue for the toilets, so it was a case of extensive planning whenever you wanted a wee. This all added up to being the most miserable flight I've had for a long time. It felt like it went on for days. To add to the misery, when we finally landed at Heathrow, we had a massive panic that we weren't going to be able to get to the terminal in time for our domestic flight. Fortunately, our luggage had been checked straight through, and there were plenty of flights between Heathrow and Newcastle just in case, but in the end we finally made it. We were extremely glad to finally leave Newcastle Airport and pick up our hire car from Budget, handily situated just a short walk from the arrivals gate. We had picked a medium-sized hatchback from Budget and were allocated a Citroën C4. With unlimited mileage and a single driver, the cost for the 5-week hire was around £1,500, or just under $2,800. We did have to put the back seats down so that all our luggage would fit in, but this wasn't a problem while it was just the two of us, and we did have 3 big cases plus backpacks, so perhaps more than a lot of travellers. We had fun and games right from the off with the car. The display was in kilometres per hour, fine if we were driving in Australia, but not so handy when UK road speed signs are displayed in miles per hour. Of course, I didn't realise this until we were already driving, so Foxy had to frantically Google how to change it as there was no user manual in the car. Now I know we're in a post-COVID world, perhaps they were removed from hire vehicles because of any issues around sanitising booklets, but even so, it would have been nice to have been told when I picked the keys up. It would also have been nice to have been told that we would have to put a supplement in the fuel at some point, as it was a diesel. But that was by the by. We were finally on solid ground, the sun was shining, and as soon as we'd caught up on sleep, we would be on our way up the coast to Scotland. Well, obviously, when I say we caught up on sleep, Foxy had slept for about 10 hours on the plane, but I was desperate for a cup of tea and a snooze. After a couple of days of jet lag recovery at my mum's, it was time to hit the road for the first leg of our actual holiday. We headed up the Northumbrian coast to Berwick-Upon-Tweed, a border town which has spent a big chunk of its history changing from Scottish to English. It's currently English, but I think their football team plays in the Scottish leagues, so it may only be a transitory state. Getting there was slightly problematic. The car's GPS had gone mad and was adamant that instead of heading north, we were travelling south, mostly in the North Sea. Fortunately, I'd been able to pick up a cheap SIM at Asda, which is a UK supermarket, and we took one of their no-commitment monthly bundle packs. The £7 option, which is about just over $12, gave me a good chunk of data. I think it was about 5 gigabytes, and also free UK texts and calls. The bundle was good for 30 days, which was enough to cover us for pretty much all of our trip, and the data was more than sufficient, especially as we tended to use any free Wi-Fi at the hotels along the way. And as a bonus, it meant we could use the phone in place of the dodgy built-in GPS. And so, on to Berwick. This traditional market town, situated at the mouth of the River Tweed, has had a turbulent past. Although it's now the northernmost town in England, its position just 2.5 miles south of the Scottish border has meant a great deal of change in hands between Scotland and England over a 400-year period, before it was finally retaken by the English in 1482. This almost constant warfare decimated Berwick's economy, and it wasn't until Elizabethan times that its fortifications were rebuilt. Its town walls are still pristine and a big tourist attraction. We only stopped for lunch here, together with a stretch of our legs and a walk around the town, so we didn't really explore Berwick too much, but there are a fair few things to see if you have the time. The aforementioned walls provide a mile-long walk around Berwick, and you can see the panels which mark the Lowry Trail. J.S. Lowry often frequented Berwick, and these panels contain his sketches and paintings of the local landmarks. There's also the barracks, which houses 2 museums and an art gallery, the town hall and ruins of Berwick Castle, and of course the 3 iconic bridges. I'll include links to the Visit Berwick and Visit Northumberland sites in the description below. After lunch, we continued our journey up to our first holiday destination of Invergarry. We'd also completely given up on the car GPS, which believed we were now somewhere around Norwich, and Foxy was officially on navigation duties using my phone. The first half of the journey was fine, all good roads, up and around Edinburgh and Perth. And then the horror started. Now, for the last 15 years we've lived in Australia, which has lovely wide roads, big car parking spots, not really a place where people park on roads, well, not in our little bit of Australia anyway, Just to show you, this is the local road outside our house. This is the A road running through our little village. And this is the road we had to travel on to get to Invergarry. Not only was it narrow and twisty, but we frequently had to share it with thousands of logging trucks coming the other way. Now, I realise that thousands may be a slight exaggeration, but you catch my drift. As I was driving, I couldn't capture the sheer terror of the drive. Here's a short animation which should give you the flavour of our journey. So, after an anxious drive, when I was really reconsidering the wisdom of driving around Scotland and England, we finally arrived at Invergarry. So Invergarry is a beautiful village on the banks of the River Garry, where the river flows into Loch Oich. Yes, you can tell that I'm not a Gaelic speaker, nor am I Scottish, so I can only hope that my pronunciation of Oich was not too painful. We didn't do a lot of exploring of the village, but we did have a good wander around the grounds of Glengarry Castle Hotel, a base for this leg, and the adjacent Invergarry Castle. So let's have a peek into the history of the latter before we settle for the night in our room. Although the existing castle profile was erected in 1602 by the MacDonalds of Glengarry, there were at least two earlier structures on the site, as its position atop the Raven's Rock. Nope, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the Gaelic version, you can see it below. Where they were overlooking the loch was very strategic. You can imagine the view commanded by this 6-storey tower. After being burned down in 1654 by Cromwell's troops and then repaired and placed under the control of King James IV of Scotland, the castle's ownership is almost a history of Scotland itself, passing from Jacobite hands to government hands several times and seeing visits from such luminaries as Bonnie Prince Charlie. Despite attempts to blow it up after the Battle of Culloden, the castle remained standing, although it was never fully rebuilt again. Despite coming under the control of the Invergarry Castle Preservation Trust in 1960, the north staircase collapsed in 2000. Historic Scotland oversaw the insertion of stabilising beams in a bid to consolidate the remains. Now the ruined castle is classified as a scheduled monument, a nationally important archaeological site or historic building given protection against unauthorised change. Glengarry Castle Hotel shares its grounds with Invergarry Castle, and the narrow road to the hotel from the A82 first passes the ruins of the castle. As you can see, it is another very narrow road. Having said that, there is only traffic to and from the hotel, and I think we only had one oncoming car in all the times we travelled up and down the road. As this was one of the main holiday parts of our trip, we did splash out and went for one of the deluxe 4-poster bedrooms. For 4 nights, bed and full Scottish breakfast, we paid £1,080, around $1,987. Our room was lovely, beautiful views from the window and loads of space. The only real issue would be that there are no ground floor bedrooms and there's no lift. But this is mentioned many times throughout the hotel's website, and they will carry your cases up and down the stairs. Due to the remoteness of the hotel, we also had dinner there each evening. This was in the form of either 2 courses for £36 or 3 courses for £45. Now these prices are as of April 2023, as I completely forgot to make a note of them at the time. And here are a couple of examples of the type of meals to choose from. The food was delicious. I did mean to take a photo of one of our meals but forgot until I'd finished. But as you can see, the plate was all but licked clean. Foxy wouldn't let me lick the plate, but rest assured if we'd been at home it would have happened. I did manage to remember to take photos of a main and a dessert later in the stay. It was just such delicious food. They were also very accommodating of Foxy's shellfish allergy, adapting any of the fish dishes where necessary to give him some extra choices. The staff were incredibly friendly and knowledgeable about the area, and you could tell it was a family-run hotel. It did feel like nothing was too much trouble for them. All the public rooms on ground floor were as you would expect for this standard of hotel, and of course, it wouldn't be a Scottish hotel without an extensive whisky list. But what about the history of the hotel? Edward Ellis Jr. commissioned the architect David Bryce to build the hotel in 1866 to 89. Bryce's other works include the Royal Infirmary and the Bank of Scotland building, both in Edinburgh. On its completion, the house, then known as Invergarry House, was occupied by the Ellis family until 1923, when it had a succession of owners before passing into the possession of the Hydroelectro Board, and then finally purchased by the three Cameron sisters in 1958, one of whom remains today as a joint owner. This family-run hotel was an absolute joy to stay in. The rooms, food, grounds, location, everything was just so good, and it was the perfect relaxing start to our holiday. We would definitely stay there again. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our look at Berwick and Invergarry. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to join us on our next journey, and thanks for watching. Leave a comment for us telling us which bit you liked the most. See you next time on our Big Pigs and Little Cities tour.